Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. We begin in the Yukon with the latest on a major slide and heap leach failure at the Eagle Gold Mine. 36 hours after the incident, there's still little information about what happened and how bad it may be. Katrin Pilkington has more.
Neither the company nor the government has been able to share whether contamination has been contained and whether there is still active risk to communities.
Yeah, the catastrophic would probably be, from what I'm hearing, would probably be a good way to describe it. First and foremost, I was very happy to hear that nobody was injured. There was no loss of life or anything like that. Now we just hope and pray that everything is okay environmentally, that, a lot of this kind of, toxic effluent didn't make it into a water course, and if it did, that they've been able to contain it and mitigate the damage to the environment.
But Ellis says right up there with environmental damage are concerns about financial impacts. Victoria Gold is one of the Yukon's biggest private employers, and the presence of the mine has been important for the community. But records show the mine's drainage system hasn't been in compliance with territorial guidelines since October of last year. The heap that collapsed was created by heap leaching, a common low-cost method of recovering gold from ore. And cyanide is a very old part of that refining process. Dr. John Steen is an industry expert. He says miners are moving away from using cyanide due to risks.
The cyanide leaching into river systems would be a very big problem. Cyanide is water soluble. It dissolves in the water, and it affects most animals, fish, insects, whatever, are susceptible to cyanide poisoning.
He says if any cyanide has reached the waterway, the impacts could be severe. Yukon government officials and representatives from Notcho-Nayik-Dun First Nation are on site and currently investigating. Katrin Pilkington, CBC News, Whitehorse.
The Northwest Territories mining industry says regulations are standing in the way of growth. That was the gist of a presentation Aurora Geosciences and the Chamber of Mines made today to a territorial committee. The groups say exploration is the lifeblood of mining, but grassroots projects are often treated as advanced ones in the regulatory process, and that makes exploring too expensive.
We talk about no future in diamond mines. Well, I don't believe for a minute that all the kimberlites in the NWT have been found. If anybody knows anything or read anything about South Africa or Botswana, they've been finding kimberlites there for 150 years. We live on probably the best craton in the world. Do we think we're done? But no, that's the message we're telling everybody, because nobody's exploring, because it costs too much.
Vivian says grassroots projects using only 2 or 3 drills shouldn't need to get a water permit. That would bring down the cost of exploration. Oil, car tires, and electrical items. They're all tough to dispose of when we're done with them, and they carry environmental risks. That's why the NWT government is looking at new ways of dealing with them. Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, is a recycling policy. It puts the onus for recycling and disposal of a product back on whomever made it or imported it. The NWT government is looking at using this type of policy for used oil, car tires, and electrical items like televisions and blenders. The MLA for Yellowknife North says it would help with the shocking cost of operating a landfill.
With this new legislation, we can actually hold producers responsible to take some of that financial burden off our government and of our communities who are spending many millions of dollars on creating landfills, managing them, and that ultimately the goal would be that this would incentivize producers to change the way they make products, so make them last longer, make them more recyclable or easy to reuse, and make them made out of less hazardous materials.
The Yukon is developing an EPR program for oil and some other products, common blue bin items, paint, and antifreeze. Every province in Canada has some type of program like this in place already. Yellowknife's graduation rates continue to be higher than those in smaller NWT communities. There's a gap of about 14% between Yellowknife and regional centres. The gap rises to about 28% between Yellowknife and smaller communities. That's according to a report released last week by the territorial government on its junior kindergarten to grade 12 system. Some say a shortage of teachers is making it worse. The principal of Little Dene School says one factor that doesn't help small communities is how hard it is to hire and retain teachers.
I've done more hiring in 1 year this year than 10 years.
The report highlights falling attendance rates across the NWT since 2018. Mulcahy says students pay for all these staff retention problems. He says it's hard to build trust when you constantly have new teachers. The NWT Minister of Education says her department is working with education boards to mitigate staffing issues. She also says the need for support services in schools and small communities has grown, especially after COVID. This includes speech-language pathology and occupational therapy.
Figuring out how to make sure that our students, especially in small communities, have access to those types of supports, I would say, is one of my next priorities.
The GNWT's report also states that the impacts of flooding and wildfires on education may take longer to understand. Delegates from Nunavut and Nunavik are back home after an emotional week in Quebec City. They took part in a memorial trip organized by Nunavut Incorporated and the Makivik Corporation. This is the second trip of its kind as part of the Nanilavut project. The project was created to help families find the graves of loved ones who died while being treated for tuberculosis in the South. Teresa Haychuk has the story.
After decades of not knowing where their loved ones were laid to rest, delegates from Nanilavut retraced their family's last steps back to Quebec City.
For a long time, I did not know where she was. She is here. As we toured the dock, I thought to myself, maybe I'm walking on the same ground she once walked on.
Hana Akuludjuk is from Panniktuk. Her mother was sent here to be treated for TB, but never returned home. Akuludjuk says this left many questions while growing up without her mother. She says she feels much lighter now, knowing where her mother was laid to rest. A monument unveiling was held Saturday at Mount Herman Cemetery, officiating a marker to remember Inuit that are buried there.
I'm happy I went ahead with this trip. I didn't want to go at first. As a young girl, I could not speak for myself. I didn't have much family. I am happy I went ahead with this journey.
On their last day, delegates had a storytelling session, communion and prayer, and later a feast. Nunavut Tungavik says it hopes to provide a similar healing journey for elders in the Kivalliq and Khitirmiut region. Teresa Haychuk, CBC News, Quebec City.
It was a moment decades in the making in northern BC. The grand opening of a new community centre in Lower Post that was also the end of a journey to rid the community of a former residential school. For years, the Lower Post Residential School not only stood in the community, it was the centre of many administrative activities and the office of the Deludena Council. After years of activism, the community got money from the federal and BC governments to tear it down and build up something new. Jackie Hong was there when the new community space opened on Indigenous Peoples Day.
The new building is called Deneco, but Deludena Council Deputy Chief Harlan Schilling says it's more than just its office spaces, its kitchen, its gymnasium.
It is now a part of it's the heart of the community.
Schilling says the new building is a symbol of hope and progress. It's a space created for the community, by the community, a stark contrast from the Deludena Council's last office. Hundreds of children from across the Yukon and northern BC were taken from their families to the Lower Post Residential School. The school closed in 1975, but due to a lack of other available space and funding, the Deludena Council worked in that building until 2020. The last of the school was finally torn down a year later. While some memories still weighed heavy, the weekend was also filled with celebration and a sense of reclamation. And for Lower Post residential school survivors like Rose Caesar, it was also another important step in an ongoing healing journey.
I embrace who I am today. I'm proud to be a First Nation woman and a strong Casca woman. And I'm just proud to be part and a member of being Casca Nation.
The grand opening of Denico was just one item on the weekend's agenda. There was also live music, a moose calling competition, and more. But for Caesar and many others, the highlight was the hand games tournament.
It's lots of fun if you understand it, and those drums just get to your heartbeat, boy. It's awesome.
Having fun is part of the healing, too. Jackie Hong, CBC News, Lower Post.
Indigenous tattooing is back in the Yukon. A Kwanlin First Nation citizen is reviving the tradition. Anne Spice is in Whitehorse for the next few weeks to tattoo almost 30 members of her community. The First Nations Health and Wellness team is paying for her work. It's a way to bring back a traditional way of healing. Virginie Anne met with the artist during one of her tattoo sessions.
My name is Anne Spice. I'm inland Tlingit, a member of Kwanlin First Nation. I live in Toronto, but I'm here in the summers in Whitehorse doing hand poke tattooing. There's Indigenous revitalization going on with our cultural forms and our cultural markings. Nations all across Turtle Island had facial tattoos. Often Indigenous women had chin tattoos. Often it would have been a coming of age ceremony for Indigenous women. For me, and I think for a lot of the people I tattoo, it's about coming into a responsibility and taking up a role and marking your relation to your nation and your people. We're seeing more and more of it. More people are taking this step, and we can recognize each other. That's the whole point, is that when you see someone else with these markings, we're connected, and we're connected through this practice, and it's a way of marking our relations. What I love about tattooing is that I don't think about very much. I like the meditative practice of it. I find it through the motion and through this form, I'm able to quiet my mind. It's nice to have a calm practice, I think, especially with what we're doing here at the Health and Wellness Center. We're really trying to ask people to integrate it into their own health journey and their wellness journey. So sometimes people are coming in and talking about trauma that they've experienced or other painful things that are happening in their lives. And so I want to give space for those stories.
My name's Aurora Hardy. I'm recently 1 year sober and wanted to mark that in different life transitions. This one just represents that reclaiming and bringing back culture and showing it in a way that everyone can see. This is something to be proud of. It's something good and something to be normalized and not something to be scared of anymore. This is our culture and we deserve to show it.
An artist from Nunavut says he hopes his music can help people rise above their challenges. Leo Matthew Timala's upcoming album explores the concepts of bullying and the triumphs and challenges of growing up in the North. It even got the magic touch from some notable figures in the music industry. Timala is from Kimarut. He wants his album to help unite people. It's produced by engineers who've worked with headliners like Dua Lipa and Drake. Timala released his single called Inuk last week, which will be included in the album. It's a song that deals with suicide prevention.
People having to push through dark days and just having to push through family matters. Just having to push through school life, personal life, whether or not you can continue your dreams in the North.
His album is called The Boy from Nunavut, and it'll be released next month. Members of the Kluane First Nation are celebrating. A book written to honor the 20th anniversary of their self-governance agreement won the 2023 Indigenous History Book Prize. It's called Kluane Lake Country People Speak Strong, and it highlights stories from the community's elders. Last October, the CBC's Cheryl Kawaja traveled to Burwash Landing as people were celebrating the book's release.
Gathered at the community hall for the book launch, as always, and especially on this day, elders are the guests of honor.
We worked very hard to come to this place and to this day, and we're really quite excited about it.
Alice Johnson says the meaning behind the stories in this book are the foundation for the children of tomorrow. At almost 400 pages featuring 22 elders, it includes photos and stories from the land, culture, and lived experience.
We have gifted the future, even though we don't see it. We've left a gift there.
Oh, that's Grace Chambers, my grandmother. That's me, yeah.
Ernest Martin is holding a fresh copy of the book for the first time.
Well, that's all my grandmother did was trap and fish and hunt and go across the lake and live there for weeks and weeks on end, right? That's what we did.
Thank you, okay? For the team that put this project together, it was a labor of love. Katie Johnson says the project has brought the community together. She notes some of the elders who shared their stories have since died, but this book will ensure their voices live on.
I think it really shows the strength and the resilience of our people here in Kluan Mun, and to know that our stories are alive, our stories will continue.
Johnson hopes the next generation will be inspired to continue this work and maybe even publish another book in the years to come. Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Burwash Landing.
You promised me that you won't look back. There's gonna come a time you'll feel the darkness. You don't let them win.
How does someone just disappear? How can I be in love with something that was never there?
We are not a dying people. We are here and we are speaking.
I had a vision that I one day would be free again.
It is my right, it is my privilege, and it is my heritage.
When we see Team Canada on the world stage, we're witnessing pure greatness. What we don't see is their struggle. We don't see Maggie McNeil navigating her anxiety, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander getting cut from his high school team, or Ellie Black hearing she's just too old to compete. What we don't see makes us who we are. We're all bravely facing the odds in our lives, and our bravery is our victory.
Who's this then?
Inspector George Crabtree.
We'll just be needing one more thing.
Well, this is delightful.
So, you want to watch CBC News Explore, a new kind of news channel. Here's how to find us. We're on the CBC News app, on CBC Gem, and on your smart TV. Stream anytime. It's always free. CBC News Explore.
Sipping on a bit of Henny. Can I get a little Remy? Feeling heavy. Chilling, but I'm feeling ready. Pulled up in a big old Chevy. Dance floor stops and Miguel them drops. Queen with the locks and the crown on top. Feet in a box, never sound on pots. If it ain't the Henny, give me crown on rocks. Ah!
The wildfire threatening the town of Churchill Falls, Labrador, jumped the river today, prompting the evacuation of a hydroelectric generating station. The river had served as a natural fire break since the wildfire started on June 13th. The small town was evacuated 6 days later when the fire grew. Officials say the station will be operated remotely from a location to the east. It's been nearly 3 years since a major wildfire swept through the village of Lytton, BC. 2 people died and nearly all the buildings were destroyed. As Yvette Brand reports, residents who lost their homes are finally seeing some progress.
It's been 3 years since the village of Lytton in British Columbia was destroyed by wildfire. Almost 90% of the structures here burned. And this came just 1 day after the temperatures in this village hit the highest ever recorded in Canada at 49.6 degrees Celsius.
3 years, I just can't believe it's been 3 years and we're only just starting to rebuild.
Rebuilding has taken a long time because of administrative hurdles, permitting and archaeology that has to be done. This is one of the longest inhabited settlements in North America, and there are many hidden burial grounds that people have forgotten about and are being found as they excavate new homes.
Right from the start, we knew from some of the early maps that there were buildings that were constructed on burial grounds, and so we knew that we were walking on the bones of our ancestors for the most part. Lytton is a storied place.
Each home must meet high standards to meet fire resiliency standards and also environmental standards. They want net zero to be built here. They want to build back better.
Well, we all have a lot of hope. Yeah. This place will always be Lytton, and it's got a lot of heart, and we're not going away.
But that's been really frustrating and difficult for some people that have been living for 3 years in hotels, in trailers, with family off-site. For them, just seeing construction begin is a sign of new hope and renewal for this town that has a history of boom and bust. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Lytton.
The shortage of healthcare workers is a common story in all 3 territories. Northerners are all too familiar with long waits and rotating medical staff. The rest of the country is also feeling the pinch, and they're turning to the Temporary Foreign Worker Program to fill vacancies. Paula Duhacek explains.
The bulk of the hiring last year was for nurse aides, orderlies, and patient service associates. This is a position that could be known by a few different names depending on where you are in the country, like healthcare aides or personal support workers. We see that there were about 2,500 approvals of those jobs, up from just 16 a few years ago. The data shows there's also growing interest in hiring registered nurses. There were about 600 of those positions approved last year. As for family doctors, there were about 200 of those jobs approved, and one organization we spoke with that runs walk-in clinics across Canada says they've hired 9 family doctors this way.
Obviously, we would love if there were more family physicians with permanent residency or citizen status readily available to fill the vacancies that we have right now and provide the much needed primary care to the rest of the Canadians, but unfortunately it's not the case. The demand that we're seeing from patients for access to a family doctor currently far outweighs our supply of physicians that we have that have the capacity to take on additional patients.
Now, I'll make a note that not every position approved necessarily gets filled by a temporary foreign worker, but the numbers show there's significant growing interest among healthcare employers in using the program. And some experts say this situation shows just how bad staffing shortages have become, that employers are looking to fill jobs through this program.
I think this is another example of the overall healthcare workforce crisis. We see high levels of workload, high levels of burnout, high levels of attrition. And if you can imagine that, that's a vicious circle. And we have to interrupt that in some way, shape, or form.
Still, that expert says even though this is one way to deal with staffing shortages, it's not necessarily the best way. And at a broader level, we should be putting more effort into retaining healthcare workers who are already in Canada. Paula Duhacek, CBC News, Calgary.
You've probably already heard that the Edmonton Oilers lost the deciding game of the final last night and had to watch the Florida Panthers hoist the Stanley Cup. The 2-1 loss was a disappointment for fans in Edmonton and across the country. They were hoping to see a Canadian franchise win the Cup for the first time since 1993. Paige Parsons has more.
It could have been a historic win. Instead, heartbreak for the Edmonton Oilers.
Sucks.
And their fans.
I was praying for this and then we didn't make it. That's so sad.
The Florida Panthers clinched the Stanley Cup in Game 7 Monday night. After winning the first 3 games of the series, the Panthers collapsed as the Oilers clawed their way back, winning the next 3, raising hopes that the Oilers could bring back the Cup for the first time in 34 years. If, for only one night, they weren't just Edmonton's team, they were Canada's team. It's been 31 years since a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. Many hoped the Oilers would end the drought.
I think there's a lot of those Oilers players that are saying, I really hope that's not my one shot at trying to win this thing.
Recent history provides reason for optimism. Florida lost in last year's final. Now they're getting ready for a parade. Despite the sting, Oilers fans remain loyal.
I'm proud of the team and I'm proud of the fans from Canada that came out, traveled all the way to Florida to cheer on their team.
These Winnipeggers wanted a cup for Canada.
It's tough to win a Stanley Cup, and Connor McDavid learned a lesson today, and he's going to come back stronger, and they're going to win the next one. And if not, maybe the Jets will.
Back in Edmonton, many were hoping that these streets would be filled with the Stanley Cup parade this week. Instead, they're packing away the banners and the fanfare. All that's left is hope for next year. Paige Parsons, CBC News, Edmonton.
And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. We leave you with a look at what our Andrew Pacey got up to during the long weekend. He was out catching a fish. It gave a good chase, but it was no match for a boat engine. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
Are you ready to be entertained?
Stand-up comedy, best comedians from across the globe.
Oh, great.
An incredible lineup. Canada. Are you ready?
Oh. Are you kidding me? CBC's got the best in stand-up comedy.
That's pretty unbelievable, man.
It's a scam. It's a scam.
No f***ing way.
Ooh, it's a bit spicy.
It'll change your life.
Catch it all free on CBC Gem.
Well done.
Y'all give it up. Give it up. Give it up.
That same woman from the SEC keeps calling. Can I give her your number?
No.
Michael Lazaridis, want to come and answer some questions?
Why is the SEC looking at us?
I'm sure it's nothing. Yeah.
I'm just wondering how you convinced all these engineers from around the world to come all the way to Canada. Do you know what the sentence is for multi-million-dollar stock fraud?
You promised me that you won't look back.
You don't let them win.
I had a vision that I one day would be free again.
We are not a dying people. We are here and we are speaking.